There are mornings when you wake up and the weight is already waiting for you. You haven't even swung your legs off the bed, and yet it presses against your chest, heavy and familiar. Sometimes it's the email you dread opening. Sometimes it's the family responsibility you cannot escape. Sometimes it's grief or illness, or the simple fatigue of carrying more than you were built to carry. Burden waits at the edge of the bed like an uninvited companion, and it follows you into the shower, into the car, into the long hours of the day. For much of my life, I believed burden was my enemy. I cursed the weight I carried, convinced that life was cruel for giving me so much to hold. I envied those whose shoulders seemed lighter, whose backs looked unbowed. I thought heaviness meant I was failing, that the strong were those who could live freely, untethered, untouched by strain. But as the years have pressed into me, I have begun to see something else. The weight you curse is often the weight that carves you. Burden is not only curse, burden is teacher. This truth did not come to me gently. It came through ache, through sleepless nights, through seasons when I thought the load would snap me in half. It came when I realized that the very weight I resented was also chiseling me into someone different, someone deeper. I cursed the weight I carried, only to see in hindsight that it had carved me into who I became. The question that lingers now is this: what if the very thing you think is breaking you is the very thing making you? We live in a culture that glorifies ease. We want the shortcuts, the quick wins, the smooth path without rocks. We equate lightness with freedom and heaviness with punishment. The slogans promise relief. Work smarter, not harder. Life should be effortless. If it feels heavy, you're doing it wrong. But the river of real life does not flow like that. Weight comes, burden arrives, and no matter how much you resist, it presses down. The lie is that burden is only curse. The deeper truth is that burden can also be gift. I think of a stone at the bottom of a riverbed. When it first tumbles into the water, it is jagged, sharp, rough. But over years, decades, centuries even, the river presses it, batters it against other stones, wears it down grain by grain. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it becomes smooth, polished, something beautiful to hold in the palm of your hand. Without the pressure, without the weight of the water rushing, without the tumbling against other stones, it would remain unchanged. But with the weight, it is transformed. So too with us. The years that feel like endless heaviness, the responsibilities that bend our backs, the griefs that press on our chest until breath feels hard. They carve us. They smooth us. They shape us into beings of depth. Pain is often the price of depth, and the very thing you thought would destroy you becomes the very thing that defines you. I remember the years I cared for my father in his decline. They were some of the heaviest years of my life. His body was failing, his dignity unraveling. His moods were sharp with frustration, sometimes cruel in their despair. I was exhausted in a way I had never known before. Nights blurred into mornings, days into weeks. I would sit beside his bed, a wet towel draped over my neck, to cool the fever of fatigue, my own body aching from lifting, from cleaning, from simply enduring. I resented it often. I envied those whose fathers were still strong, those whose evenings were free, those whose lives looked unburdened. There were moments I snapped in anger, not at him, but at the invisible weight that seemed to have singled me out. Why me? Why this? Why so heavy, so long, so endless? But now when I look back, I see something else. Those years carved me in ways nothing else could. They stripped away my illusions of control. They forced humility into me, not the kind you learn by choice, but the kind pressed into your bones by necessity. They taught me tenderness, patience, and a compassion that could never have been acquired from books or lectures or quiet meditation. They taught me what it means to love when love costs everything. In the moment, the burden felt like prison. But with time, I see it was also teacher. I used to think burden was what ruins us. Now, I know it is also what makes us. The same stone I once cursed for its jaggedness became smooth in the river's weight. The same years I once cursed for their heaviness carved me into someone who could bear tenderness, someone who could sit with another's suffering without flinching. So I no longer say burden only breaks. I say instead, yes, burden can break, but it can also build. This is the double truth of weight. It is curse and it is gift. It is prison and it is teacher. And the difference often only becomes clear when you look back. So I ask you, what if the weight you are cursing right now is also the weight that is shaping you? What if the heaviness you hate is chiseling you into someone you cannot yet see? Responsibility, grief, strain, suffering. We do not ask for them. We do not want them. But sometimes they are the very river that polishes the stone of our life. Sometimes the thing we despise is the very thing that deepens us. Burden shapes us, and though the ache is real, though the fatigue presses deep, though the longing for relief is natural, still I say, do not despise the weight too quickly. For it may be chiseling you into being. There are burdens you choose, and there are burdens that choose you. The chosen ones can even feel noble. The new child you cradle, the career you dedicate yourself to, the vows you whisper at an altar. Those weights you step into knowingly, or at least half-knowing, but the burdens that choose you are different. They arrive without asking permission. They land on your shoulders when you are least ready, when you would give anything to avoid them. They come in the form of illness, of grief, of family decline, of unexpected responsibility you never planned for. My father's decline was one of those burdens that chose me. It was not a season I stepped into willingly. It was placed on me, and for a long time I resented it. He had always been a proud man. Strong, disciplined, unwilling to ask for help. To see him diminished was its own kind of grief. To see his independence vanish, to hear the frustration in his voice when his body failed him, to become the one who now carried the man who had once carried me, it all felt like a reversal I was not ready for. I remember the smell of antiseptic in the room, the endless piles of medication bottles, the sound of his labored breathing at night. I remember my own back aching from lifting him, my hands trembling from exhaustion as I tried to help him to the bathroom, the weight of his body heavy on mine. There were nights I would sit in the kitchen long after he had fallen asleep, my head in my hands, a wet towel draped around my neck, sweat cooling on my skin, wondering how long I could endure it. I remember staring at the ceiling, praying for relief, bargaining with life itself. I cursed the weight, I cursed the endlessness of it. I envied others whose evenings were free, who could sit in cafes laughing, who could take holidays unburdened. My world had shrunk to the perimeter of his care. And yet, when I look back now, those years carved something into me that nothing else could. They stripped me down to humility. They forced me to let go of illusions of control. They dug patience into me grain by grain, like water wearing down stone. They pressed compassion into my bones, not as theory, but as survival. There was a night when he gripped my arm so tightly I thought he might bruise me. His eyes were sharp, filled with anger at his own helplessness. He snapped words at me that cut. In the moment, I wanted to walk out. I wanted to leave him to his bitterness. But I stayed. I carried him. And later, when he fell asleep, I sat there, tears slipping silently down my face, realizing this, too, was love. Love is not only the easy moments of affection. Love is sometimes carrying someone even when their words wound you, even when the weight feels unbearable. Love is sometimes shouldering what another cannot, even when it breaks you open. Those years did not make me glamorous. They did not make me successful in the way the world measures success. They did not make me efficient or accomplished. But they made me deeper. They carved into me a tenderness I would never have known otherwise. They chiseled away my arrogance, my impatience, my selfishness, until what was left was not polished exactly, but more human. At the time, the burden felt like prison. Now I see it was teacher. This is the hidden work of burden. It shapes us in ways we cannot see while we are inside it. The ache blinds us to its chiseling. But in hindsight, we begin to recognize that the weight did something to us. It made us capable of seeing others more clearly. It gave us empathy for those who stagger under loads we might once have judged. It softened us, or it toughened us, or it rooted us, but it never left us unchanged. I think often of that stone in the river. Centuries of water press against it, grain after grain falling away, until it becomes smooth. If you hold it in your hand, you feel something almost sacred about it, the weight of time, the work of water, the patience of pressure. Without the burden of the river, the stone would never have become what it is. So too with us, the weight that presses you may feel like it is stealing your life. But perhaps it is carving your life. Perhaps the load you carry is chiseling you into someone you could never have become otherwise. And here is where the philosophy of it begins to turn. For years I believed burden was only curse. Something to escape as quickly as possible, something to resent, something to rage against. But life has taught me differently. Burden is paradox. It breaks, but it also builds. It wounds, but it also teaches. It imprisons, but it also shapes. What if strain itself is the way strength is revealed? What if pain is not just cruelty, but the price of depth? We imagine a life of ease would make us happy. And perhaps in some seasons, lightness is necessary. But ease alone does not deepen us. It does not carve patience, humility, or resilience. Those are born in weight. Even suffering, unwelcome and cruel as it feels, can open into meaning. I once read that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. I know this is true because I have lived it. When I cursed the weight, it broke me. When I began to ask what it was teaching me, it began to shape me. The weight itself did not change, my relationship to it did. This is not romanticizing burden. I do not pretend the ache is sweet. Pain is pain. Exhaustion is exhaustion. Anger is anger. But beneath them, or perhaps through them, something else can be born. A resilience, a tenderness, a depth that only weight can carve. So I say now, with the clarity of hindsight, weight is teacher disguised as curse. The load you carry may look like punishment, but it may be chiseling you into being. The detour is this: do not despise your burdens too quickly. They may be the very thing that saves you. I used to believe that freedom was the absence of burden. That if I could only set the load down, I would finally breathe, finally be alive, finally rest. But I see now that life without weight is not life at all. It is drift, it is emptiness. What I needed was not to escape all burdens, but to learn how to carry the ones that mattered, and to let the others fall away. The stone in the river taught me this. When I hold one of those smooth river stones in my palm, I realize that what makes it beautiful is not that it avoided pressure, but that it endured it. It is the weight of the river that gave it its shape, and I began to see that the same was true of me. I cursed the years I carried grief, responsibility, exhaustion, but now I see those were the very years that smoothed me, that deepened me, that shaped me into someone capable of tenderness. The weight was not my enemy, it was my teacher. That doesn't mean I glorify burden. I don't go looking for heaviness, and I don't pretend it doesn't hurt. But I no longer run from it either. When it comes, I ask what it is teaching me. When I feel the ache in my back, I ask what strength is being revealed. When I feel the strain in my chest, I ask what compassion is being carved there. This is why I can say now, burden can bless. Weight carves depth. The very heaviness you want to escape may be chiseling you into someone more human, more awake, more alive. So I ask you, what has your heaviest burden taught you? What weight have you cursed that in hindsight may have carved you into being? What strain might be revealing your strength, even as you ache beneath it? You don't have to pretend the burden is sweet. You don't have to deny the pain, but perhaps you can begin to see it differently. Not as curse alone, but as teacher, not as prison, but as chisel. When I began to see my father's decline in this way, something shifted. The exhaustion didn't vanish, the nights were still long, the work still heavy, but the bitterness softened. Instead of asking, "Why me?" I began to ask, "What is this shaping in me?" And slowly, almost imperceptibly, gratitude grew where only resentment had been. Gratitude not for the suffering itself, but for the depth it carved. That is the detour I offer you. Bless the weight, not because it is pleasant, but because it is shaping you. Bless the burden, not because it is easy, but because it is chiseling you into being. The truth is simple, though it has taken me decades to learn. What burdens you can also shape you. What you curse may be the very thing that saves you. The weight that strains you may be the weight that deepens you. I used to think burden was punishment. I used to rage against it, to pray for its removal, to envy those who seemed unburdened. But now I see, burden is the slow work of love. It is the chisel that carves our rough edges. It is the river that smooths our jaggedness. It is the weight that teaches us patience, tenderness, compassion. Without it, we would remain sharp, untouched, shallow. I cursed the weight I carried, only to see it had carved who I became. So I bless it now. Not in denial of its pain, but in recognition of its gift. The burden was never only prison, it was teacher, it was chisel, it was the hidden hand that shaped me, and so I offer you this benediction. Bless the weight. It chisels you into being. When the load feels too heavy, remember that it is shaping you even now. When the burden makes you ache, remember that it is carving depth into your soul. When you long to be free of it, remember that freedom is not the absence of weight, but the presence of meaning within it. One day you will look back, and the burden you cursed will reveal itself as the teacher you needed. The stone polished by the river, the branch bent but unbroken. The life carved deeper, more tender, more human. Bless the weight, bless the burden, it is chiseling you into being.